Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are, however you might be watching slash listening. Thank you for making us part of your day. I'm Justin,
I'm Alexander.
and we are the hockey podcast you're about to hear. And Alexander, did I tell you that I used to be scared of speed bumps?
Used to?
Yeah, I'm slowly getting over them.
Okay. Well, I don't know how that goes for you.
Right? We'll see. It's taking a sweet time.
Okay. And with that,
Uh huh.
where are we at today, Justin?
Oh, trade deadline day is what we find ourselves today.
Woohoo.
So some interesting trades happened today. Some happened over the weekend. Some happened like a month ago. So a whole bunch of stuff to get caught up on. So where do you want to start? You want to start over in the metro?
Starting the Metro, we'll run it alphabetically because that's the thing to do. And what's very interesting about starting in the Metro is we're talking Carolina Hurricanes off the top. Is that correct?
That's correct.
They did bum diggly squat up until the very last second of the day.
Sure
And even
did.
what they did was not all that impressive because basically they traded for Max Domi, which is not a needle mover in my mind
No.
for Carolina.
Yeah.
Now,
Like
Carolina is a very good team, so they didn't need to do a lot,
true.
but
Very
they also did
true.
a lot.
Yeah. So how do you feel about them overall as a team getting ramping up for playoff time?
I, I, I know a lot of people like them, and a lot of people like Brendamore, and you think, okay, this is a team that's been put together for a cup run for several years now, and it just hasn't happened. Um, I think they're fine. They're definitely probably one of the best. I'd say they're
Well,
probably one of the best five teams in the league, but they're probably one of the best five teams in the East as well, or one of the best four teams in the East. Like
there you go. Yeah.
their path to a Stanley Cup is very difficult, more
Right.
difficult than somebody coming out of the West as far as those top teams go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they'll be whatever. If they go on a run, their goaltending stays hot like it's been this year, and their defense plays well, which it always kind of has. Great, then
Right.
they'll be a contender. If they don't have the depth that other teams have around them, and they don't have the size and the forwards that other teams around them have, then maybe good, maybe crap.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Be a toss up.
Yeah, I mean,
But
they'll still make the playoffs. They'll still be one of the top seeds in the East. You would
mm-hmm.
expect them to beat whoever they play in the first round,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
kind of where they've been at for several years. So unless they really make a hard push for the conference finals, it's a whatever year.
No. Fair enough. So right now they're doing good, and reevaluate come playoff time, huh?
Yeah.
Alrighty. So let's bump over then to Columbus Blue Jackets.
Did they do anything today?
Uh,
Uh,
looks like that was the only trade they did.
yeah. They basically did the deal with Carolina. So again, Columbus is not a team that's really a playoff type team.
So do you want to
As
bury
far
him?
I think we can bury him at this point. I mean, we should probably give justification for that. We're actually going to do that, but that's pretty easy to do because you look at the East and you look at the
Ooh.
comes into the wild card, and Columbus is currently 13 points back of Washington.
Yeah,
So
that's a little rough. That's quite the
Wash-
mountain to overcome.
Washington has to tank, and Columbus has to play far above their station. I think it's and we've been talking about this all year. It's really not even all that close in the East. There's 8 teams that are separated from the rest of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
8 up and 8 down is the way it is. So we're probably just going to burying everybody in the East apart from the playoff teams.
Yeah. Seems fair. Seems fair. Okay. New Jersey or is in our graveyard. Did they do anything interesting today?
I don't really think they did anything today. They didn't really have any reason to do anything today.
No,
I
it
think that's
looks.
just a minor trade. One of the things about trade deadline day is it's a whole bunch of guys you've never heard of,
Yep.
and even the biggest name player or players that were traded today still aren't even all stars. Like honestly,
Mm-hmm.
so it's a day where the only thing that's interesting is if you see a team really shaft another team who is, and we'll might get to that down the road here in a minute. But it's yeah. So Devils did basically nothing. They kind of had a nothing burger kind of year.
Oh yeah.
Another team that's just out of it and doesn't need to talk about it anymore.
Alrighty. So that brings us to the Rangers.
Rangers did do some things. Rangers had themselves the opportunity to get better today, and for what it's worth, I think they did. I don't think they made any moves that were, you know, earth shattering per se. I know some people think Andrew Kopp was a big name that was out there,
Mm-hmm.
and he's definitely who they probably paid the most for. But still, they didn't give up any first round pick. Like if
Yeah,
you didn't
that's big.
trade a first round pick for somebody, you haven't really traded for anybody.
Man,
You
they
know, like
have.
when go ahead.
I'll say they had quite a few trades. Looks like. Sheesh.
Yeah, yeah, they added a couple left wingers, a right winger, and a defenseman. Probably nobody that's going to play in their top six, so it's just depth that I guess helps you survive a long playoff run. Which,
Yeah.
with the goaltending they've had this year, that's great. But if they don't get that goaltending, which sometimes you don't in the playoffs, we've seen
Mm-hmm.
it before, where
Mm-hmm.
top end goaltender suddenly just doesn't quite hold it together.
Or
You
sometimes you still get that top end goaltending, but the other team's getting just a hair higher goaltending from their goaltender.
you run into an even hotter goaltender than the last
Yeah.
one.
So.
So, um, I mean, they made the moves you expect them to make if they're trying to do more this year than just make it in, which they're at a point now that they're at, but I think they're still probably a year or two away from being where the other teams around them are, like to
Mm-hmm.
be considered a Carolina or a Florida or a Tampa Bay or whatnot. They're the tier behind basically the top tier of teams in the league this year.
Yep. They're not quite to like, oh man, the Rangers are coming tonight, but they're getting pretty close.
Pretty close.
Okay, so slap a good on them and expected for trades and move on to the Islanders.
And we can skip the Islanders, just bury them in the grave and keep walking.
Okay, keep on walking. Philly, we got in the graveyard already.
Yeah,
Uh,
Billy more so just for who they traded away in
mm-hmm.
Claude Giroux, which everybody kind of knew was coming. So
Mm-hmm.
not that big of news. They got what you would expect for Claude Giroux for
So
you
there's your
know
first round.
the few games that he's going to play for them and whatever they do in the playoff push and potentially you know be a difference maker at some point. Um, that I'm trying to remember the last time that I saw a trade deadline where the moves that were made by that team eventually got them to a Stanley Cup final. Maybe they didn't win
Right.
the cup,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, boy, the moves you guys made, we can see where these players just made the difference
Yeah.
in your playoff run.
Right.
And I think we have to go back a couple of years to Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman that Tampa
Mm-hmm.
Bay gave up their first round picks to acquire these guys because they had term.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It wasn't just like, okay, we get him for this playoff run and then he's a free agent out the door. They had them controlled, so they built a really strong line together with those guys and Yanni Gord that really did play a factor in all their playoff series and Stanley Cup wins over the last couple of years. If you're not doing that today, then everything that you do today and moving things around is, for the most part, deck chairs on the Titanic. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to put it. I like it.
Very few things are moving the needle today. But
Right.
there will be like one or two guys somewhere that's like, hey, that was a great pickup at the deadline. but you can't
Mm-hmm.
see that right now.
Right. You especially can't see it right now either with because it's hard to compare until the draft picks actually get picked and then see how they do and yada
Yeah,
yada
when you're
yada.
a few years down the road, like,
Mm-hmm.
you ended up taking this guy. He played 17 games for you, got injured, and wasn't even a part of your playoff run.
Yeah.
And you could have picked this guy that became a second line center for the team that you traded him away for.
Yeah. About that.
So
Alrighty. Well, with Philly in the graveyard, that takes us to Pittsburgh.
another very quiet team today,
Mm-hmm.
which they didn't have space, like cap space, to do anything. They have a solid team. They did do one move though, and that was for a guy that was Ricard Raquel out of Anaheim, that was on a lot, like towards the top end of a lot of trade lists. So
Mm-hmm.
right winger, you know, help solidify your forward core around what you have going on right now in Pittsburgh. That's great. Um, it was basically a dollar in, dollar out deal. So they sent
Uh,
a draft pick and a player and a minor leaguer and the signing rights to, some of their guys away just to get the money to equal. And it wasn't even that much money. I think Ricardo Kell was like a less than a $2 million player. So just basically kind of the only move that the Penguins could do. They got
and
one
they
guy
did it.
just to basically say, "This is what we can do."
Yep.
Um, Other than that, no big whoop. They also picked up a scrub defenseman that
Mm.
I don't think you'll even see his name when they're playing in the playoffs. It's not like, oh, Nathan Bialio is back on the ice again,
Ah,
or this
I
is
knew
such
it.
a
I knew he'd pay off. I knew it. Called it. Called it.
so. Um, as Pittsburgh
Right.
tried to do something, but they weren't in a position to do much.
So yeah, kind of tough to do much, but at least gotta show your fans you're doing something. So alrighty. So with that said, wrap up the Metro with Washington.
Um, so Washington did trade a couple pieces today. They got a guy named Marcus Johansson who was with them before. Traded for a guy out of Arizona named Johan Larson, a centerman. For what they gave up for those guys, you can tell they're not needle movers. Again, we're not talking a
Mm-hmm.
lot of needle movers. We're talking bottom six forwards, third and fourth pair defensemen in quotation marks, basically your seventh or eighth defenseman you're going to carry in the playoffs. Those are the kind of guys that you're picking up today.
Mm-hmm.
They got somebody that was familiar. They got a depth center. That's great. They didn't give them anything outside of the first two, or they gave up picks outside of the first 2 rounds to acquire these guys.
Right.
So it's not that big of a deal. And really, they weren't in a position to do much. And this year, I kind of think they're going to be cannon fodder in the first round for where they end up playing, because they're either going to end up playing either Florida or
Oof.
Carolina.
Oof.
Like
Yeah.
more than likely, as things stand right now. Maybe the Rangers, the Penguins win the Metropolitan, and they play one of those two teams. But
Oof. That's really close in the Metro.
when you're a wild card, you're going to end up playing a team that's better than you.
Mm-hmm.
Duh.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, is what it is.
Yep. I'm with you on that. So let's bounce over through the Atlantic and start off with Boston.
Boston. Boston
Ooh.
was interesting.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes, they were.
what made Boston interesting?
They got Hampus Lindholm and Cody Curran from the Ducks for a first, a second, and 2 D-men.
Yeah. So cool. And then again another minor, I guess minor trade in quotation marks with Ottawa, but the
Mm-hmm.
Hampus Lindholm one is he was basically one of the biggest named defensemen out there to go for, and the reason they paid so much for him is because they then signed Hampus Lindholm to like a 8-year, $6.5 million deal or
Whew.
something like that. It was, it really was quite, um, so I'd say surprising, but maybe disappointing that somebody thought that much of him when
Yeah.
I really wouldn't have. So, um, yeah, just kind of
Head scratcher?
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. apparently he's somebody that they liked for whatever reason, and good for them, I guess, because it 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 didn't do anything for me. Maybe he'll be the answer for D for a long time for them, but I feel like Boston is about to head into more of a rebuild scenario
I feel
as
like
you
they've been
age
circling that
down.
drain and then circling that drain and then not going down in the drain. Somehow
Yeah,
staying in the sink and not getting washed down.
yeah, and so I guess it's kind of well, let's kind of see what happens down the road. But now you got this guy that you've signed for a while, so good on you guys.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see how that pays off. So, um, anything else in Boston before we move on to Buffalo?
Now we can we can
Who?
grab a shovel and go visit them.
Yep. So Buffalo's already in our graveyard. Looks like they.
Did they even do anything?
Yeah,
I don't
they
remember.
traded Robert Hagg for a sixth with the Panthers.
Wow.
So that was the. That even wasn't there. That was yesterday. So that was their big.
So you could trade for me for a seventh round pick. So um, I think that's the yeah. We'll
Just
move on.
mosey right on down to Detroit.
So as a Detroit fan, we had a lot of high hopes for this trade deadline. We do for every trade deadline. Like, okay, what can we get rid of and what can we get? In the end, there's not a lot that we had that people wanted. It wasn't necessarily
Fair.
like
Yeah.
asking too much for guys. It's just like you guys aren't very good. You don't have a lot of very many good players that you're really ready to move. So what are we gonna do? In the end, we ended up getting rid of I think four guys. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Again, dealing in all depth guys, borderline, even being borderline in Detroit guys, like guys that weren't everyday players in Detroit.
Oof.
So didn't give up anything amazing. Didn't get anything amazing for him. I think in the end we probably comfortable with all the trades that were made, but nothing that was like, wow, we really got this. The only possible great thing we did out of this is there's a kid named Jake Wallman who plays D. He's a left-hand D, and that's where Detroit's weak is
Mm-hmm.
left-hand D. Um, in St. Louis, he was stuck behind the left D that they have there, and he could never really move
Uh-huh.
my depth chart.
Yep.
So the thought is maybe give him a chance, and um, we will we will see what the future holds for that kid.
There you go.
So great,
There you
but
go. All right, and then safe to say, put him in the grave. Then, yeah.
oh, all the way in the bottom.
Alrighty, well, let's put our shovels down for a minute because we're moving to Florida.
I would I would ask Florida what they were thinking when it came to Ben Sherratt. I really would. Um, who do you think this guy is that you're
Ooh,
giving away? First round pick,
ooh.
fourth round pick, and a player for? Uh, as a pure rental, and then also as a pure rental for Claude Giroux, and
Yeah.
again some no-name centerman gave away another first-round pick and a third-round pick and one of your prospects in Owen Tippett. Like Florida sold the house. This is like they think they're going for it this year. I'm like,
Apparently.
I I understand they have a really good team this year, but by God, you got to go through Tampa or Toronto, Carolina, or the experience of Washington, Pittsburgh, Boston.
Mm-hmm.
There's no easy road through the East, honestly.
There's really not.
And so I understand loading up as much as you can, but to do this for rentals, if Florida wants to win next year, they don't have anything until a 2025 first round pick to trade for something they want to buy next year. They didn't get anybody with term.
Oof.
So it's kind of a fail in my mind. Sure, this year it might succeed, and if you win the cup, all this doesn't matter, right? You don't
Right.
care after you win the cup. Oh, we don't have another first round pick for 3 years. Um, golly, they paid a lot of money for what they bought. They get a lot of valuable assets for what they're getting. So
Yeah.
they better make a hefty cup run.
Yeah, make it deep, deep, deep. All right. So, anything notable in Montreal that we haven't mentioned already?
Really, they anything that they did is again just cleaning out the floor to get as many draft picks as they can. Like if you look at the
Mm-hmm.
draft picks that they have acquired, it's second round pick in a couple of years, second round pick this year, first round pick next year, fourth round pick in a couple of years. Like they're just stockpiling draft picks going forward, which is what they got to do. I mean, honestly, their best return was probably for Tyler Toffoli,
Right.
I think. Yeah. So great. Um, but at least Tyler Toffoli had value because he was a decent player that had term. You know. Um,
Yeah. And that was a month ago.
yes. So, anything else has just been
Me.
just I, this is how you rebuild a team, right? I mean, you decide, hey, we're cutting this thing, and away we go.
All right, there we go. So on that, away we go to Ottawa.
Again, that's a deep graveyard. Anything they do or did is always just confusing as to what the heck were you guys thinking? Um, yeah, it's a weird organization. They were trading for fifth round picks and fourth round picks. Like they had nothing that could even get much of anything. I think
Oof.
the best pick they got was a third round pick for. No, they
No.
gave up the third round pick
Yeah.
for
For
Travis.
Travis Hamonic. Wow.
It's just
What?
mind-boggling.
Okay.
Hey, future considerations. That's a good one.
All right.
So
I know.
yeah,
Yeah.
Ottawa doesn't know what they're doing. Just the plain and simple. They just don't really know what they're doing.
Fair enough. So let's go to a team that hopefully knows what they're doing in Tampa Bay.
Tampa. Well, how is it possible that teams that are up against the cap somehow find a way to get players that put them over the cap, but nope, find ways to squeeze money here and there to stay under the cap?
We're like
It's
$3.50 under the cap. Yes.
yeah. Now they made a trade for Brandon Hagel, which is two first-round picks. I don't know that I've ever heard of Brandon Hagel, so I don't know that he's worth these two first-round picks.
Right.
Um, Now, I think the idea is that Brandon Hagel is as good as who you would probably get with a top 20, 25 to 32 range first round pick. So the fact that they gave up the first round picks that they'll probably be in those ranges for the next couple of years, you're basically getting Brandon Hagel at that point.
And the picks are top 10 protected.
Yeah, if Tampa Bay finishes in the top 10 in the next 2 years, something has gone majorly wrong.
Lots and lots of injuries, eh?
Yeah, yeah. Um, no, that's a team plane crash like
Right, yeah.
bad kind of thing. I'd possibly see where this team falls off a cliff like that.
Right.
Then any other moves and stuff they did were fairly minor. The Nick Paul one is interesting. It seems like they basically are trying to again put together a third line of guys that maybe play above their station to be a strong third line, as opposed to a really weak second line. They're trying to make a really strong third
Mm-hmm.
line. So you look at Hagel, you look at Nick Paul, you look at Riley Nash. Yeah, if that becomes the next line of the future, great. Um, and I don't know. I don't necessarily question too much of what they do because anything they've done the past couple of
Right.
years has worked pretty good.
Yeah.
So, but I think a lot of their success over the last couple of years came from the success they had the previous 7 years
Also
with
true.
Eiserman
Also agree.
making the decisions. So let it be what it is.
Right.
Um, I still think Tampa Bay is one of the strongest teams in the league,
Oh, yeah.
whether they made these moves or not. And
Yep.
so they think they got
Agreed.
a little bit better. And if one of the best teams gets a little bit better, that's all you're looking to do.
That's a little bit scary. A little bit scary. So, yeah, see how that pans out. And then close it out the Atlantic with Toronto.
This is again basically like one of the biggest names was the Mark Giordano, and for
Mm-hmm.
Mark Giordano was one of the biggest names of the trade deadline. It's not that big of a trade deadline.
True. Hurtful, but true. Yes.
It's like, hey, he's what, like 39, I think.
Yes,
Like
it cuts me
if
deep, but you're not wrong.
if a 39-year-old defenseman is the big get at the deadline, we are not talking about a major trade deadline.
Yeah.
So,
I'm like, why Toronto, man? Like, ugh. Toronto
he's
for Geo. Ugh.
he's from Toronto. He's super happy to be there. Yada yada yada
Yeah.
yada.
You can play with TJ Brody again. I'm assuming that's who he's going to get paired up with. Is,
Um,
just like they were in Calgary.
Maybe someone that can come in and help the negative effects of playing in Toronto. Could be like, guys, you want to hear a negative story? Like, listen to me, listen to my life, listen to where I've been and what
Mm-hmm.
it took me to get here.
Yeah,
I'm
no
ready
kidding.
for I'm ready for things to turn around. So I'm
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
go to Toronto. What? Uh,
What? Okay.
hey, if
Sure.
if you, if you're playing in Seattle and you have family in Toronto,
Oh,
which
yeah.
he did, and they're like, hey, you want to go play in Toronto and actually play in the
Yes.
playoffs this year?
What?
Sign
Yes.
me up. So
Oh,
yep.
okay. Okay.
Can I please have what he's having?
Yes.
Uh, so all right, good deal.
Cool.
I and we'll probably get to this. I don't necessarily know that Seattle Kraken know what the heck they're doing because it's like, oh, we want a second round pick, and a third round pick for Mark Giordano. Well,
Oh, okay.
you need to push for one first round pick, like straight up, or an established prospect,
Mm-hmm.
and none
Yeah.
of this second round pick stuff. And
Are they
it was,
just trying to throw enough darts at the board that they hope they hit something?
I'm guessing so, but that's really not the best way to do it. So let me, they, on one of the broadcasts I was watching today, and I grabbed this information because I knew it would be useful. For when you're picking, they gave the percentages of a player taken in that
Oh,
round to play 100 games in the NHL. All right,
yes.
which sounds like a lot, but it's an interesting number because basically that's like a year and a half. But that might be a year
Eh,
and a half over being called up and back down, and like just to hit this benchmark of 100 games in the NHL. You're obviously a great hockey player to play at that level for that long, but for the NHL, it's like there's a lot of guys that play 100 games. But
mm-hmm.
this is something that you know makes it long enough in the league. They're there for a season and a half total or more. So if you were picked in the first 10 picks, that's a 95% chance you'll play 100 games. If you're picked in the next 11 picks, it drops to 78%.
Ooh, wow.
If you're picked then from that point to the end of the first round, you're down to 60%.
Sheesh.
All right. Once you get out of the first round, the second round, you have a 42% chance. So basically knock your chance of a first round pick to a second round pick, making the NHL goes from
Huh.
worst case scenario 60 to best case scenario 42. You go to a
Wow.
third round pick, we drop all the way to 27%.
Whew.
So a third round pick, you're saying you got a 1 in 4 shot of finding an NHL player there.
Oh.
And then from there, basically those as you keep going through each round, it drops by like 4 to 5 or 6% each time you drop a round.
Jooey.
To where you get to a seventh round, it's like, okay, you got an 11% chance of making it. So
Yeah, sign me up, I guess.
you are far better getting one first round pick and taking a shot on that guy than you are taking several shots with a third round pick.
Huh, that. I knew it was going to be different, but I didn't think it was going to be that much of a difference.
Right?
That's
It's
very
significant.
interesting.
Basically, anything outside of the first two rounds isn't really anything other than a blind swing at a bat. Like
Right.
that's it. Your chances of getting those guys to do anything is just very, very low.
Huh. That's crazy. But I
So
mean, it makes sense.
when you see Seattle like stacking up all these picks in later rounds, it's like that doesn't really do much for you.
It looks good. I think somebody's watching too much football, not enough hockey. But, whatever.
Like
So,
Arizona was looking for first round picks,
mm-hmm.
and Detroit's always looking for second round picks. Like that's what they got for Letty today.
Hmm.
Once you get outside of those two demands, it doesn't matter whether it's third or fourth or seventh at that point. Your margins are, you know, so low. I mean, it's just yeah.
Huh.
So when we say we're not impressed with the return, that's a 2025 second round pick. That's what we're talking about. It's like, okay, that's a guy that 7 years from now might have played 100 games in the NHL. For a guy that you traded for
Sheesh.
today that's going to play every night between now and the end of your season.
Right, yeah. Huh, that's crazy. That's crazy. Alright, so anything else on Toronto or the Atlantic or the Metro or the East as a whole?
No.
Alrighty, and let's move on to the West and start with the Central. Anything notable from Arizona?
This team has more draft picks than God. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
no kidding.
Like, the next several years, they're just loaded up. This coming draft, they have 3 first rounders and 4 second
Oof.
rounders. And that's not to say they're not going to move around like come, you know, actual draft day. Because now that you have a ton of options to trade for players that you know are good, and somebody else can draft a player that you don't know is going to be good,
Right.
or keep trading for players and you're just going to have a huge crop of talent in your, you know, your pool that's all 18 years old at the same time, and therefore they're all going to be 26 at the same time. You're going to have this core of players that's all, you know, on the same kind of contracts. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I will say this: they are clearly, hardly, and fully into a rebuild,
Hmm.
and they're doing it right. You either need to get really bad, really fast, or get really good really fast, and
Mm-hmm.
they're on the getting bad side. So,
I think they've been there for a little while now, haven't they? Oh.
well, they've been kind of bad, and they decided, guys, we need to get really bad.
Let's get our act
So,
together. Come on, we can do better,
yeah,
or worse.
it's like we're only going to play in front of 3,000 people the next few years every night. So,
Yeah. Who
we don't need
cares?
to put on. We can put on a college show with a
Yeah.
bunch of college players, and this will be fine. So they said it's even possible players that they draft like out of the OHL will come and play for Arizona in the NHL in a smaller arena than they were playing in the OHL.
That seems legit. Yeah. Sure.
So no, good on them for continuing to sell what they can sell,
Mm-hmm.
and they still have a big piece in Jacob Chikrin. Like that's the biggest
Oh
piece that
right.
did
Yeah.
not move. And so young quality defenseman, lots of upside on a good long-term contract. Well, long-term, I think it's 3 years right now. So somebody cutting out for this year plus the next 2 years. He'll be another person that's probably either traded in the off season for a big haul or next trade deadline for a big haul.
Mm-hmm.
I would expect in the off season
Right.
once people's caps and stuff are not quite as big of a problem.
Stretched. Yep.
And the Coyotes asking price for him is the equivalent of 3 first round picks. So they want like a first round
Ooh.
pick, 2 first round prospect players, or 2 picks and a player, or 3 picks, or whatever. Um, and they held their guns and said, "Look, if we're not getting that, we're not trading
Mm-hmm.
them today."
So we don't have to trade him. So yeah.
So
Good
away
on
you
them.
go.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Okay. So Arizona is already buried. The next team already is buried as well. The Blackhawks.
there's a lot of questions as to what the Blackhawks would do with some of their veteran players, like the
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane, and apparently they decided not to do anything with those guys this year. So they made a minor trade to Calgary for Carpenter, and they at least got Fleury out to a place where he can go chase a cup in Minnesota
Mm-hmm.
or a first round pick. Um, and there's conditions around that, but basically, Fleury gets out of Chicago, out of that,
Yay.
out of that hellhole.
Yes.
And in the end, with the trade we talked about earlier with the Lightning, today the Chicago Blackhawks basically picked up a first-round pick, a first-round pick, and a first-round pick in each of the next 3 years. So
Whew.
that's a good bit of business.
That's a good haul. Yeah.
So, huzzah! Now, I believe the first-round pick is conditional. It could be a second-round pick based on how Minnesota does in the playoffs and how Fleury does for Minnesota in the playoffs.
Correct.
So it
Yeah.
could be a second-round pick,
But
which, as we
still.
said before, is significant.
Mm-hmm.
At least you got something for a guy that you couldn't really do anything with.
Right.
So
exactly. Because
and
he ain't gonna be signing back.
It also had to be somewhere where Marc-Andre Fleury wanted to go.
Right.
So it had to be a place that could afford and a place that Marc-Andre wanted to be. And so with those limiting factors, their hands were kind of tied. So I think honestly the Blackhawks probably did pretty well for what they had dealt to them.
I would agree. All right, now let's mosey on to Colorado.
I think Colorado is one of the winners of the deadline because here's what they did. They didn't do anything major, but they didn't overpay for any of the minor things they did.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me is a sign of a very smart manager in Joe Sakic, and I hate to say that because I'm a Red Wings fan.
Twitch.
But, the market kind of started getting crazy with teams like Florida being like, okay, we want this guy. Okay, we want this guy. Here goes all these picks and stuff. The market really did seem to get expensive, particularly for defensemen. Colorado kept their cards close to their vest. They played things down to the wire when they needed to. They made moves ahead of time as they needed to. They actually had a really good last week of filling in their team where they needed to make things happen. Bolster what's already probably the best team in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they're going to be one of the best 5 teams in the league. And we won't know really how good they are until they play in the Cup final, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
Maybe one other team that they might face that might really challenge them, but beyond that, I don't think anybody else is anywhere in their class for what they can do. They may, honestly, they might go 12-0 all the way to the Cup final.
A little bitter from last year.
I say that just from the standpoint of how strong they are. Honestly, their goaltending will not let them go 12-0 to the Stanley final. But still,
it's something to think about. Yeah.
If they could have made a difference at goaltender here at the deadline, if they could have got Marc-Andre Fleury, then maybe we had a shot.
Right.
As it was, that's not how it played out. So let it be what it is.
Right. There we go. So with them winning the day, let's bounce down to Dallas.
Dallas is weird because I don't know if they're going to make playoffs or not.
Do we bury them, or are they just kind of like, or they kind of have some dirt on them, but nothing official?
I think it's the first team we can't say we need to bury because it's depending on the day they're in or they're out.
Right. Because they still have 3 games on Vegas and they're 1 point behind.
Right, like points percentage wise, they're a playoff team.
Right. Yeah.
Standings wise, plus minus wise, they're not. However, that can all change in the matter of a couple games where Vegas goes on a run and Dallas loses a couple more, and it's like, oh, okay, now there's too much distance between.
There's the Dallas we recognize.
Dallas still has over 20 games left to play in the season,
which is
crazy.
You can
move a lot in 20 games.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, they'll be pushing for a wild card spot. I don't necessarily think they're catching St. Louis or Minnesota in their division. They could. Honestly, they could. Or Nashville for the wild card. The Central has 4 teams for 5 spots, or 5 teams for 4 spots.
Yep.
Right. And there's just but no, we can't bury them because they're definitely right there.
Yeah, too close to get in. Yeah. Yep. No, I'm with you. How about trade wise? Doesn't look like they really did anything.
So you got Nemestikov from Detroit, who is he's been a top line winger in Detroit, or a third line winger in Detroit, or a third line center in Detroit, or a fourth line center in Detroit, or a second line winger in Detroit. He's been all over the lineup, and so
alrighty.
Um, yeah, he is versatile, I think is what we're looking for. Very versatile.
There you go.
Um, and then they picked up a goaltender because they're going to have some goaltending issues for a cheap fourth
Mm-hmm.
round pick in 2 years' time. So um, no no big moves there, but at least they did something to let their team that's in the playoff hunt not feel like guys are not doing anything. You just got to get there with what you have. It's like okay,
Right.
we'll try and make us a little bit better, a little deeper in goal, a little better at the forward position, but you guys got to do it yourselves. And
Uh-huh.
so it's again, it's a team that doesn't move the needle. I don't think the Dallas Stars have what it's going to take to go on a Stanley Cup run.
No. Like that magic was used up, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So, with Dallas being there, where do we find Minnesota?
Um, they got Flower today, so
They did.
that's a team that Minnesota's cap situation overall is dire because the space that Jay generated by buying out contracts last offseason come due
Right.
in the next 2 seasons. And so this is the only year where they actually have cap space to try and make things happen and make a run. Their next 2 years are going to be brutal cap wise.
Yeah.
So now we say that, and yet teams always seem to find a way out of that stuff.
Right? Somehow,
So
some way. So.
whatever. Um, they were able to offload um, a kid from Harvard that wasn't going to sign with them coming out of college because a lot of kids that go to Harvard they get drafted when they're 18. But if you go to Harvard, if you can go to Harvard, you're really smart.
Hey, you
Well,
better
you're not
keep
going
going.
to leave. Well, you're not going to leave Harvard after 3 years and go play for your NHL team. And so after that point, you can become a free agent. So a
Right,
lot of
yeah.
kids drafted to go to Harvard end up not signing with the team that drafted them because that kid gets traded away
Mm-hmm.
before he becomes a free agent. So it gives Arizona a chance to sign this kid when he graduates, and Minnesota is going to do both of them. So smart move there. Um, yeah, but other than the Marc Andre Fleury, nothing there was super amazing.
Right?
So
Yeah.
on on on
Oh,
we go.
on to Nashville.
Nashville. Did Nashville even do anything today?
Uh,
I,
minor,
I
minor,
don't.
minor things. Yeah.
I don't
No,
know
I
if they
know.
did anything worth doing. Um, yeah. So okay, Nashville. Cool story. Um, I think they got Jeremy Lazan from the Kraken, which I recognize the name just from like, okay, I've heard him before. Beyond that, I couldn't even tell you
Yeah.
where he would slot into their lineup. I think it's just depth defense. Looks like basically all they did today was get depth defense. Um, so whatever.
Right.
Yeah, it's a team that is there at the playoffs in the wild card lower division bubble. That's not really a cup contender. So
Kind of upper end, mushy middle.
yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. How do you think about St. Louis Blues then?
They overpaid for Nick Leddy, and I loved it. So the Wings acquired Nick Leddy for a second round pick, used him this year, and then traded him away for a second round pick. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's basically like getting your deposit back on your rental.
Right.
Um, so it worked out really well for Detroit. Maybe the Blues will find something there that he couldn't do in Detroit. Um, but he's been kind of a disappointment for us. Yeah, good luck to Nick Leddy, and they also took Luke Witkowski, who could play defense or forward. Again, you're talking like a third pair defense or a fourth line forward. Like that's the kind of player we're talking about.
Whew.
Uh,
Yeah.
nothing, nothing crazy. St. Louis was really quiet. Again, that was like their only move. They were like Carolina was like, "Yep, we got this one move we're gonna do."
Sure.
Um,
We just want to be at the party. So.
yep.
Alrighty. So that brings us to Winnipeg.
Winnipeg's right on the borderline of if we bury them or not, considering the fact that they sold today and they sold like Andrew Kopp, who they could have held on to. Um, I I don't see them changing their their fortunes with anything that they did today. Again, a bunch of nothing burger kind of stuff,
Right.
second, fifth round picks and whatnot moving around. Nothing that really says, hey, this team's thinking about going for it. So I think we could probably even just bury them.
Yeah.
I know they could get hot somehow. Hellabout could get hot and they could make a run, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah. Neither do I. All right. So, anything else on the Central?
No, I think I'm satisfied with the Central's lack of interestingness.
All right. Okay. So, brings to the Pacific. We'll start with Anaheim.
Anaheim. So this is a team that was basically selling everybody. So they did a lot of selling over the past weekend, basically. Even going back last week when they moved some pieces or a piece to Colorado. And they're in the spot where they overachieved this year, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
for where they were, and their new GM sees that, so he's really acquiring. He's still in the point where he's acquiring picks and prospects and low level players or bad contracts or whatnot, and that's great. That's a shrewdish move. A lot of GMs don't necessarily want to do that,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's not necessarily a fun process of just coming in and just cutting everybody and be like, you're at the door, you're at the door, you're at the door. Give me whatever I can get for you. Everything's for sale. Take what I
Yay! Except for this guy. I like this guy. He stays.
Yeah. Um, the Ducks are a team that are 20 million below the cap, basically. Like,
Woo!
and their cap hit today was 65. Okay, their projected cap space is 12 million in cap space.
But still.
They're another team that's stocked up for draft picks in the future. They have a couple first rounders this year, a couple second rounders this year, but then they got 3 and 3 for the second round the next couple of years. So, just kind of stocking the shelves for a more of a rebuild than maybe people thought they were going to have. So it's probably a good thing that they didn't try and make the playoffs this year, because you would have slowed your progress towards long-term success if you had had a playoff run this year
Mm-hmm.
by fluke, by hot shotting.
Right. So
That's actually what Vancouver did a couple years ago, where they really
Oh yeah.
weren't ready for the
Uh-huh.
playoffs, and now they think they're a playoff team. It's like, but you're not. You still need some rebuilding to do. You still need some depth and talent and whatnot, and don't get good before you're ready to be really good. And Anaheim at least is like, okay, then we don't want to be this good yet.
Right. So put him in the grave. You think?
I'd put them in the grave.
Okay. Alrighty. Anything else on Anaheim before we move on to the next team?
No, I think I'm ready.
Alright. It brings us to Calgary.
Well, Calgary. Tell me what Calgary did. Tell me all about what Calgary did.
Well, I'm gonna start by saying I'm definitely okay with the Tyler Toffoli trade now. Like, I think I said last time I had some reservations. Just seemed like a lot. Nope, I'm good with it. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely good with that. Um, next one they got was Kelly Yarncrook from the Seattle Kraken for 3 different draft picks. I mean, I guess kind of I don't know. Oh, it's so torn, but I mean, one was the 7th, so it's like that one's kind of meh. Moot. One's a 3rd, and then one's a 2nd. So, you know, we'll see how he does. I'm not that familiar with Yarncrook at all. I don't know if you are or not, but
Um, I only because his name is Yarncrook. Um, he was a guy that didn't fit in Nashville, and so Seattle took him in the expansion, thinking, hey, we're getting like a decent player, and then Seattle just had a bad year, so they're like, well, we got to get something for the decent players we have.
mm,
So, like, depth forward.
yep. So gearing up for the playoffs, and then Carpenter from the Blackhawks for a 5th, and a goalie from the Senators for future consideration. So definitely more than I thought they were going to do, especially after the Yarncrook trade came in. I didn't think they were going to do anything else, and then 2 more things came in, even though they were kind of tiny. but still they're doing stuff and moving and.
Here's the thing. Your future considerations. Um, the Flames traded from Montreal Canadiens for this goaltender for their future considerations, and then today they traded that goaltender away to Ottawa for future considerations. So this goaltender just keeps getting moved around for future considerations, which is
Yeah,
hilarious.
that is funny. I didn't even notice that. Yeah, that is funny.
Okay.
But no, I think getting fully in, getting the Yorker in, I think that'll tighten up some things and yeah, hopefully batten on the hatches and here we go.
And which I right now it's easy maybe to say, okay, well if they're the best team in the Pacific right now, then they're
Mm-hmm.
the second best team in the West behind Colorado, yada yada yada. Is that true? I think so.
Yeah.
You know, like if you said head to head right now, if they were playing, even if they were playing Vegas, like the way Vegas look lately, I would
Ugh.
take them. And so I think I'd take them over Nashville or Dallas or Edmonton or Los Angeles. The St. Louis and Minnesota might scare me a little bit. Colorado's
Yep.
the only one that I think is a real, obstacle they will have to climb. So a Colorado
Uh huh.
Calgary Western Conference final, honestly, would be fantastic.
Oh yeah, I agree.
You know, I think that's where we'll head towards. So that's probably not what we're gonna get. But
Kiss the death right here. Timestamp it.
uh, no, I think Calgary. That's the run that they could make. They're poised for that this year, and I think you're going to see a different team in the playoffs than you've seen previously under Suter, right?
Let's
So
hope.
um, it's easy to say, oh well, Calgary's going to Calgary, and they're going to do what they've done the past however many years when they hit the playoffs and just poop the bed, or
Yep.
um, or be the underdog and upset a team. It's like,
Right.
well, no, I think this year they're going to play a brand of hockey, and they're playing a brand of hockey that's going to translate really well, and they're going to be a very difficult team to beat. So,
Yep.
and they're difficult to beat 4 times in 7.
Yeah. I
So,
don't think I've said it on here before, but that's one thing I've noticed under Sutter is when the Flames get down on the rare occasions where they get down like 2-0, old Flames would just be mopey and just kind of go through the motion the rest of the game. This year's Flames are fighting back and fighting hard. So I'm not used to seeing that. So high hopes for the playoffs.
nice. Very nice.
This year, so. Alright, so after Calgary, we have Edmonton.
A team that doesn't have much to give based on how poorly they are run. So I think they upgraded a little bit at defense. I think they think that they upgraded a little bit at depth center. I don't know that they did, but fine, whatever.
Right.
None of those guys play goal, so unless you're actually willing to address your goaltending, I don't think you did anything
Yep,
to
that's.
warrant you being anything other than the bubble playoff team that you are.
I also expect them to do something with goaltender, but they sure didn't, so here we go.
Yep.
Alright, so how about Los Angeles?
Another team that I think is okay, in that we're having a better year than we thought we'd be having, but we know that, so we are not going to sell to get better this year. We are going to stay the course, see how far this group gets, hang on to all our draft picks, see what we can do with those, kind of thing. So they haven't sold the farm to go all in this year because they're actually not at that point. So they made some minor moves for some lesser known individuals.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. They acquired basically a bunch of defensemen.
Yeah.
Which is, if you get one of those guys to get, play 80% of your games from here on out, that's probably a win for what you gave up.
There you go. There you go. So, alrighty. So, Seattle's in the graveyard. Anything interesting there besides their Geo?
They should just probably stay in the graveyard. Like, holy cow, guys! Like,
Is this what an expansion team is supposed to look like? Like,
I'm not impressed with anything Seattle has done apart from naming their team the Kraken. And the jerseys. Honestly, the jerseys are probably the most
I do like the jerseys.
thing about this team. Everything else beyond that is just a whatever, and that's like you have cap space, and you couldn't weaponize it. You have all these players that you drafted that you're then sending back to the teams that you took them from when you said, we want a first and a third to protect the player that you don't want us to take, and nobody would pay it. So they took the players, and like, you could have them back if you give us a fourth round pick.
Right.
Okay.
Did
So
you guys think this through? I don't think this plan was very well thought out.
That we couldn't protect, hang out in Seattle for the year, and now you're just going to send him back for nickels on the dollar.
Seems fine to me, yeah.
That's, that screams to me poorly run organization.
I agree. I agree.
Basically, the two guys that actually got something for in Mark Giordano and Cal Yarncrook, right? Again, that's second round pick, second round pick, second round pick, third round, seventh round. That's your best hauls, which is embarrassing, I think.
Yeah, a little bit. A
So,
little bit. Those poor fans in Seattle.
bad team, bad run,
Yeah.
bad coach, just bad.
Indeed. Now to another bad team in the Sharks.
The Sharks? I don't know what the Sharks are even trying to do anymore.
So they had a lot of transactions.
Yeah. If transactions made for a good team, they'd be a fantastic team. But it doesn't. Again, this is honestly, if there's one team that is deck chairs on the Titanic, it's the Sharks, because they just signed Tomas Hertl to a long contract, and so their
that's
centers going
right.
forward are already old, and their defense core is way old and way overpaid, and they're just gonna crash and burn. I don't see.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
This is a team where this year they were having an above expected good year, because I didn't think they'd be outside the bottom 5, and they were pushing for a playoff spot for most of the year. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
I think they're in for 10 years of suck.
Oh.
Until you get out of the Carlson contract.
Yep, that's what I was just about to say.
This is Davy Jones' locker right here. This is
through and through.
Bad. This is 7 kinds of bad. So.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
So how do you feel about Vancouver then?
Like we said, a team that had one good year and thought it was something, and it wasn't, and now they're just now. I will say this: at least they have changed management.
True.
And Rutherford turned Travis Hammernick into Travis Dermott, who is an upgrade and a younger player. For basically, hey, I give you guys a third round pick, you give me this player. Hey, I give you guys this player, you give me a third round pick. Like, the shuffling in and out of what he did was honestly not bad. So he traded a player for something, took that something, and traded it for a player that was better than the player he first traded away.
Right.
Good deal. Happy for him. But they didn't have much to do. I know there was all this talk of, they could trade Besser, they could trade JT Miller, they could yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, that's not happening.
In the end, are they technically still in the playoff hunt? Yes. Should they be?
No.
No. And
Put them in the grave.
They'll go in our graveyard.
Right.
They're technically only 4 points out of a playoff spot right now. But given that they just went through the weekend they played, their last stretch here, they had 4 home games and they went 1-3. It's okay, if you're a team that's serious about we're gonna try and make a playoff push, you get points in all those games.
Oh yeah.
And they didn't. You lost to the Red Wings 1-0. That tells me you are not going to make the playoffs if that's what you're doing. So look at you.
All right, and speaking about teams that might not make the playoffs, surprisingly, Vegas.
Vegas. Well, they have issues. Most of them deal with being healthy, and you can't necessarily control that. Like,
Yeah.
you feel bad for him because I think if they were healthy from
Oh yeah,
goaltending
absolutely.
to top line centers and forwards, second line centers and forwards, and defense, like every part of their organization has been hit substantially. I think they have like $30 million worth of players right now that aren't dressed.
That
Like
sounds right. Yeah.
They're not an LTIR because they're expected to be back in the next however long, but like they need to win games today, and they don't have the players that they should have
Yeah.
to help them win games today. So could they miss the playoffs? Yeah, yeah, they absolutely could. Um, will they potentially fire the coach? Yeah, yeah, they might. They just absolutely might because Vegas likes to do that. So I, I get to be like, guys, we just need a play. We need a new coach bump. So let's go find somebody else to bring in. Um, turn this whole thing into a mess.
So if we do it at the right time, it might work for us, right? Right? Because that's how
Might.
that works, right?
Um, no, I think Vegas is in a spot where they might just creep into the playoffs and then be a really, really good team in the playoffs.
Right. If they can get there, they can make some noise, but they got to get there first.
Here's what we want to see. We want to see Vegas get the 8th seed so that they play Colorado.
Hey,
and then,
that would be juicy.
and then Calgary can play the 7th seed, which, like, you don't want Calgary to play Vegas the first round
No.
because that's that's upset territory.
Oh yeah.
And so you want to send Vegas to Colorado. Colorado can exercise the demon that is the Vegas Golden Knights,
Mm-hmm.
and
Or can they?
that storyline moves. um, so that's what I'd like to see.
All right. There you go. So
And if Edmonton can get in as the 7 and have a first round matchup against Calgary,
go.
that would be so bueno.
all right. So Vegas against Colorado and Edmonton against Calgary for the first round.
That would be just darn near perfect. Yeah.
Right. I don't know. It's be some entertaining hockey right there.
hmm The problem is the reason that can't happen is because there's not enough teams in the Pacific to fill the second and third spot. Like Vancouver would have to overcome the grave, jump everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and push Edmonton out, so you'd have like a Vegas Vancouver first round matchup. So I guess if we can have one of those nice things, that would
Right.
be enough.
We'll be happy. We'll be happy. Indeed. Alrighty. Well, anything else then on the Pacific or the West or the league as a whole?
No, I think that pretty much covers what we saw today and what we usually see at the trade deadline. Um, a lot of minor moves, nothing that really shook the earth, nothing super unexpected. There was no Mantha to Washington for a whole bunch of other stuff like last year, which, hey, spoiler alert, didn't do much for Washington,
Right.
but
Sure
that's
did
none
a
of
lot.
my business. So, yeah, it's a day where a lot of guys make mistakes and very few people seem to do well.
Uh-huh.
We saw that again today.
Oh yes.
There is a substantial difference in how teams are run between being run really well, being run well, and being poorly run.
Yeah.
And you can tell on a trade deadline day, on a free agency day, on a draft day, which teams are and are not right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite stark. So, um, there was a um, there was somebody that posted this on Twitter several years ago. I don't remember in what regards to what team or whatnot, but they basically said, if you paid me $1 million to work for your hockey club a year, and all my job was to do was tell you 5 times, don't do that, I would be worth the $1 million.
Oh, absolutely.
And there are some teams that do not have that guy, and there are some teams that do.
Yeah.
And you can tell the ones that did because they didn't make moves today. Like, think of like Los Angeles, right? They didn't go out and do anything stupid.
Mm-hmm.
They realized where they were. Anaheim didn't do anything stupid, actually started to sell the farm
Mm-hmm.
because they're not there yet. And then there's some teams that were like, Florida, hey, let's trade everything for this year.
It could work out, right? Because it worked out so well for Columbus a couple years ago, right? Right.
Like, Florida probably will win a round, maybe two. That's what I expect Florida to do. But there's no way they're getting through three teams in the East the way that any three teams in the East. You stack up any of them, however they'd have to play them. I don't see them getting through all three of those. I just don't.
Yeah.
So you
It'll be a long shot for sure.
On a bad house. So
Yeah.
no, maybe Bobrovsky goes crazy, goes on a heater, happens every year.
Right. Somebody gets hot. Somebody goes cold.
But I will say this: every year it seems like there is a team that we expect to be in the Stanley Cup final, and a team we didn't really expect to be in the Stanley Cup final.
Mm-hmm.
At some point. So whether that's the Blues' crazy run, or Vegas being a expansion team, or the Montreal Canadiens for no freaking reason, suddenly winning games they had no business winning.
Yay!
We have a representative. Even Dallas got hot.
Yeah, they did.
When they were expected to be there, and they got there. And then you have a team that should be there, and that should have been Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, Boston. Like, the teams that were there were not like, oh, wow, they made it this year. It's like, no, that was basically their goal from the start of the season and a reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
And so you usually have that, this team should be here, and this team's the Cinderella.
Wait,
or
what?
Cinderella-ish.
Yeah, right.
And I just, I don't see there being room for a team like Florida. I just don't.
Yeah, that'll be rough. That'll be rough indeed. So, but hopefully, there should be some good playoffs either way, and exciting to see what happens over next month as the teams finalize and all that, and see who gets to play who, and looking for some good matchups.
This is also the point of the year where injuries scare the heck out of you because now you can't do anything to help your team overcome it.
Yes.
So.
And I hope you did the right things, and I hope everyone stays healthy.
Hopefully, all your expensive guys heal just in time for Game 1 of the first round.
Mm-hmm. And not a minute before.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, anything else, or I think we'll call it there.
I think I'm good.
Alright, sounds good. So I'm Justin.
I'm Alexander.
And we're the Hockey Podcast you're about to hear, what you just did. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye.